Hey everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy, I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. Great show today. Today's guest is Alexandra Stréliski. If you don't know who she is, let me read you her bio right now. Raised between Paris and Montreal, pianist and composer Alexandra Stréliski didn't set out to make music for a living, but after a long night of the soul, so to speak, dedicated herself to writing and performing. In 2010, she recorded her first album, Pianoscope, and late last year, her latest album, Inscape, was released on Secret City Records. In addition to these, she's also composed the soundtracks for a number of director Jean-Marc Vallée's projects, including the films Dallas Buyers Club and Demolition, and the HBO series Big Little Lies and Sharp Objects. I heard Inscape, I thought it was great. Also, I watched those HBO series and enjoyed the music. And Alexandra was in town, and I'm like, yeah, let's talk. And what an interesting past. We get really into, I think, music as therapy. And we talk a lot about her life in Paris and in Montreal. And about existential decisions. So, you know, the usual on Beginnings. I'm going to keep this intro short today because Mabel is here in the room with me. Mabel, by the way, talk about, I recorded this episode right after we got Mabel. And we were worried that she might not get along with the cats and we'd have to give her up. But I will tell you this, months later, Mabel and the cats get along. I would say, I would give it a hearty B+. They get along pretty darn well. But she's here in the studio with me, and she is champing at the bit to get out and go hang out outside. So I'm going to keep this very short. I would just say this. Thank you so much for listening. If this is your first time checking out the show and you want to hear more episodes, you can get them all on Spotify, or if you want to download them at beginnings.libsyn.com, or, of course, the last 100 episodes are in whatever your podcast app is. Hey, 10th anniversary of the show is coming up soon. That's exciting. But also, if you want to subscribe to the show, please do that on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify or Google Play or a bunch of other places. Amazing episodes coming up. I just talked to the guys from Twin Peaks. Also, Michael Cronin has been on the show. Josh Siegel, who's a writer for 30 Rock and Kimmy Schmidt and Great News and Good Place and a bunch of other things. That was a fantastic talk. Larry Hankin, wonderful performer and character actor who you would probably know as Mr. Heckles from Friends, but he is an incredible performer going back to like the 60s in Greenwich Village and hanging out with like Bob Dylan and people there. And we had a really great talk. So stay tuned for those episodes. If you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, I'm at Andy Beckerman. And I guess that's about it. So thanks so much for listening. Stay tuned for all those episodes I talked about. Check out old episodes. But for now, let's talk to Alexandra. Wait, your last name's originally Dutch, right?
Yeah, far away Dutch, but yeah.
How far? I was just in Amsterdam over the summer for a family trip.
Interesting.
And it was, we really don't like Los Angeles that much, and we're from New York. And
why do you live in Los Angeles then?
Because work, we have to. Right. If you want to write or act, almost like all the writing and acting jobs are here in Los Angeles. Yeah, it's. I used to be an academic, and one of the things that I left before my dissertation, and one of the things that bothered me so much about it was that I was like, oh, if I actually get my PhD, I'm gonna have to just go to whatever university hires me, and that could be in the middle of like Iowa or whatever. No, no shade to Iowa. I'm sure it's a wonderful place to live. It's just not where I want to live. I want to live in New York.
All right.
Anyway, Amsterdam. Obviously they created New York, but I was like, oh, if I lived in Europe, I could live here. This is
it's great. Netherlands is great. I go there quite often, actually.
Do you have how far back does your family go there?
It's like 5 generations. We were French after my dad, like his grandfather and his grandfather before are French, but before that it's all pretty much Dutch, and then before that it's Polish.
It's interesting how, I mean, this is a little banal, but I'll say it anyway, and maybe something interesting will come out of it. But the fact that the deep history. I always think about this, and maybe you don't feel. You live in Montreal now, right? Yeah. Maybe you feel it a little bit. In America, I feel very uprooted. I don't feel like there is a solid foundation. Where I think if you're European, you're like, yeah, I go back thousands of years. My family goes back thousands of years. Whereas my family came over from Hungary 100 years ago.
Well, then your family does come back from 100 lots of years. It's just that you don't know about it, I guess.
Yeah, but it's like there's that discontinuity that because I'm here, it just doesn't. And also thanks to the pogroms and the Holocaust and all that stuff, whatever real history was there's little beacons I can pick out. I know at some point some of my family got kicked out of Spain during the Inquisition.
Right. Oh, that's funny. I was just speaking to someone, actually, Emmanuel's friend who's right here. She was actually telling me that her family is also from Spain and they got kicked out, and the same thing, Jewish Spanish people.
And obviously if you're Jewish, you're like, well, we've been around for 5,000 years. So there's a little bit of that.
I actually come from Jewish origins too, very, very Jewish actually. But I think for some, I don't know, political reasons probably they converted, like many Jews throughout history.
Is there any kind of crypto Jewish practice in your life?
No.
There were some people, do you know what crypto Jews are?
No. I don't, but there's no Jewish practice in my life, so I assumed.
There are some people who do things like light menorahs.
What is that?
The eight branched candelabra thing.
Okay.
And they do that, and they
okay.
There's a lot of but they never knew it was Jewish. They were never taught because they kind of went underground, and so they go in their base. I don't know if they still do this, but they go in their basement and they do all the Jewish practices, and they're like, oh, that's just what we do, without connecting it to.
They don't know that it's Jewish, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
No, we don't. I don't think we have any of these things, but I do feel very strongly. I still feel a bit Jewish. I think it's a bit weird maybe to say, but I do feel it's very close. When I play the piano, I feel it for some reason. Yeah.
Is there a particular, I don't know if you can articulate it or if it's just a feeling that you have.
Yeah, it's a feeling. And for some personal reasons, I've been brought back to the Netherlands recently, and I realized, and I started reading because my brother did this huge research on my ancestors and stuff, and I started to read about it, and they were all musicians. So I just musician. It was quite fascinating for me to find out actually that I'm from this lineage, that it makes total sense that I'm doing what I'm doing now.
And you had no idea that was your lineage before you started, because you started playing music at a very early age, right?
I was 6. Yeah.
And there was I started playing piano then, but quickly gave it up because my piano lessons conflicted with Alf, which was on Monday nights.
Yeah, well.
And I loved Alf more than I loved expressing myself on the piano.
I think I just needed to play the piano. So I needed to watch Alf probably a little bit too, but I needed more to play the piano.
Wait, what was it? And again, I'm trying to force articulations of feelings, so I don't know how to what degree, but when you say needed to, were you compelled to? Was there something about the piano that at when you were 6 that it's just there's something about this that feels right to play, or some way of expressing myself?
Definitely more simple for me and more complex to express the emotions that I had. I don't think I think it took over. I don't know. I think it just helped me to sort of develop emotionally, develop myself emotionally.
Okay. Do you mind if I like prod that a little bit?
No, yeah.
Okay, great. What? Again, 6 years old. I guess it's tough. So you're looking at your manager.
I don't know. She's looking at me.
Is it? If I'm stepping on something,
not at all. No.
Feel free to say like,
no, I'm good.
We're not going there.
I will.
I'm trying to remember. I was very emotionally repressed for most of my life, probably up until about therapy, about 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, Mazel Tov. 6 years is not that much of a long time.
No. Yeah. No. I definitely. It sucked. But I remember that like I definitely the way that I was able. You could sneak it out through music. Like if I played music, I could kind of sneak it out a little bit there, but still for me, it was always buried under layers of like obscurity or absurdity. Most of the stuff I did in that era was buried under those things so that I could never be, because to me, to be vulnerable was like so scary.
Yeah.
What was it? Was there something similar going on where you were like emotionally repressed and then that was a way you could express emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. I was also very scared to show my vulnerability. And that's the main reason why I didn't want to go on stage. I was afraid I was going to get swallowed by all the emotion and that, I was afraid to show myself as who I was really. But then I also found this was the most powerful thing that I could do. Obviously now this is what I think, but it took me a long time. And I was emotionally I was a very sensitive child. I was very, very sensitive.
Yeah.
And so I think I feel a lot of things, so they need to go somewhere. And I think music is a more complex way. I mean, I'm sure some authors and some illustrators can reach that, but art in general like gives us this sort of set of tools to express feelings that are more profound, I think. So that's why I say I needed it, because these feelings needed to go somewhere. I don't think I would have been as sane as a person if I didn't express that.
I was thinking about this earlier. I was listening to your new album, and my wife and I just had couples therapy today, and so I was feeling listening to your music. I was feeling very contemplative.
Yeah,
and I was like, I wonder if obviously I'm making this into a binary, and it really is like I don't think it is like this. I think it's probably on a spectrum, what I'm about to say. But that like I'm like, oh, it's making me like it's evoking in me feelings of contemplating stuff. But I also just had therapy. Yeah. That was kind of like a little raw in some places. And we just got a new dog. And it's we're not sleeping a lot because we're caring for the dog. And we fostered a dog earlier in the year, and it never got along with the cat, so we had to give her up, and it was very heartbreaking to have to give the dog up. And so now it's triggering those same things. So we're both living in this fear state. So, okay. I realize this is a long preface, but I'm saying we talked a lot about that, the fear of having to give up the dog in therapy. And I'm like, is your music just allowing me to feel this stuff, or is it hijacking my emotions and making me more contemplative, contemplative?
I'm definitely not trying to make you feel stuff about your dog. That's impossible.
No. I know, but I was thinking in general in music.
No, I'm just making a joke. That's a very interesting question, actually. I think it's making you feel and making you go within yourself, and that's what I'm experiencing, because since I launched Inscaped, I realized, and that's what the word inscape means. It means to go within yourself and to escape within yourself. And I just realized that people have been telling me that it's really bringing them into their whole interior lives. And and so I do not think that I'm there. Those are not my emotions. They're yours. It's your own trip.
Do you think? But personally, you said you were a sensitive person.
Yeah,
and I was too. And I kind of think that like my body naturally shut a lot of that stuff down because everything was too painful. Everything was felt too much. And so when I was younger, I think that's what it just naturally like, this is every little thing is magnified by like a billion. So let's try to like deaden that.
Right.
And I'm wondering like, I get easily hijacked by other people's emotions. I get too attuned to things in the world, and so is music giving me permission to feel something, or is music like a dial tuning me to a certain thing in general?
I think both.
Yeah.
I think both.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer.
there's some kind of catharsis also, and we also feel less alone because we're like, oh, this human seems to be living life a little bit similarly to me. Oh, I can relate to this, weirdly enough. And we're talking about solo piano. So it's quite interesting. There's no words. I'm not feeding you any concepts. This is just raw emotion, very abstract. So I think we feel a bit less alone in our existence. And also I think it just gives you permission to just calm down, sit down, reflect, take a moment, and I think we need that lately, and just maybe we've always needed that, actually.
When you sit down to write something, I usually don't like to talk about process or anything like that. But this is just like a thing that this made me think of. Do you have like an idea? I'm a writer mostly, and so like when I write, I've got the idea in my head, and then I go put it on the page. Yeah. But like when I play, because music isn't like my first. I don't think in music. I don't think in notes. I have to like fuck around on my guitar. I fuck around on my keyboard before I find something that I think is interesting. Do you already have do you think in music? Do you think in melodies?
No, not at all. I mean, I can have sometimes I get actually hijacked by a theme, something that just comes back and comes back and comes back. And there's this song that I just don't want to write down because I don't think it's good enough, but it keeps coming back in my head. But mainly I just sit down at the piano, and then my emotions come out. And sometimes I don't even know that I'm feeling like that. And I can listen, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm feeling like that. And then I get a bit obsessed with a riff, and I sit down, and it comes back, and I build it. And then it gets structured with time. So mainly it's from improvisation in the beginning.
So what was going on when you were 6 that you decided to start playing piano? You're living in Paris then, right?
Yeah, I was living in Paris. I think what was going on? We had moved to Paris, and I don't remember. I asked to play an instrument. I didn't ask to play piano, but I asked to play something. And my parents then at the time had a composer friend, so they asked what should she play, and he said instinctively piano because it's a whole orchestra. So then I started, and then I have a friend who told me, because I can't even remember this myself, but she told me I was obsessed. She told me I was just like playing and playing and playing and playing. I was playing, like I was practicing. I was really concentrated into doing this, which is weird because now as a person I'm not like that. I don't like practice for 4 hours on something at all. So, but when I was a kid, apparently that's what happened. And what was going on in my life? Just, I don't know. I was living in Montreal. We moved to Paris, and so it was new. And I don't know. Maybe I had to express some stuff in regards to that. I don't know. I've never actually asked myself that question.
What I mean, it could have. Was it a rough move? Why did you move from Montreal to Paris?
No, I wasn't. Well, we moved because my dad had some career opportunities. His career was going really well in Montreal and Canada, and I think he wanted a challenge. So he decided to open his agency in Paris. He was working in advertisement. And no, I wasn't really. I don't remember it as being hard for me. I made new friends. I was 6. And I remember I thought Paris was beautiful. So my sister found it very rough, but not me.
Was she older?
Yeah, she was older, yeah. So she was a bit more out of her world suddenly.
How does your family get to Montreal in the first place? Like, are they? How many generations back do you go there?
In Montreal, only one. It's only my mom and dad. My mom comes from Abitibi, which is north of Montreal, like 7 hours north. It's quite up there, and my dad comes from France. So he moved there because at the time, I think you had the choice in Europe to do your service militaire, your military service, or to go do some kind of other program in Canada. So he didn't want to do the military stuff, so he just took a boat.
Wait, does France have like kind of like an Israel type thing?
No, really not like Israel. No way. But in his time, it was actually obliged for men to do that.
Was it like the 70s?
Yeah, it was the 70s. Yeah.
Was that changed now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't have to. You're not obliged to do it anymore. Now we're mostly in a world of economic war, I think, than military.
Sure. Now you have to put on a yellow vest or not.
Yeah, you're gonna be obliged to go to business school now.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can either go the Macron way or you can put on a yellow vest.
Right. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
So they meet in Montreal. Your parents?
Yeah, they met in Montreal. My mom was a producer. She was working on a film, I think, and my dad, he was a journalist, and he started working in advertisement, and then he met my mom like that.
Wait, how? I don't know if you know this stuff, but like, how did he make the transition from journalist to Don Draper?
I remember he was really Don Draper, actually. I think what he told me is that one of his friends just told him, "Hey, I think you'd be good at this. Try it out." And he tried it out, and he was actually very, very good at it. And then he started to win all these prizes, and he became this big shot Don Draper
really?
Dad. Yeah. Yeah. And
was he like that at home?
Was he what?
Was he like Don Draper at home?
No, not at all. No, my dad's a very sweet man. He's never lost his little boy soul. And no, he's very nice. He used to make us laugh a lot. He was working a lot, but so my mom spent a lot of time with us. We were three, and but no Don Draper at home. I think he kept that for the office.
So your older sister, and
older brother.
Yeah. So you're the last of the three.
Yeah.
How much older are they?
I have 3 years with my sister and 7 with my brother.
Okay, so was it difficult for him? So he was what, 13 when you guys moved?
No, he was even more than that. He was like 16, I think, when we moved. Yeah.
Oh, so was that rough? I mean, what's the... I've been to Montreal.
He's French. My brother is actually French because my dad had my brother with another woman.
Okay.
Before, and he was born there. So for him, it was a bit more of a known territory, I would say.
It's like a homecoming.
Yeah, and he's also very chill. My sister's the most complicated one. I hope she hears this.
I mean, was it a big cultural difference? Again, I guess your sister, who is like, she kind of, her personality is a little bit more established at like 9 or 10.
Yeah, she.
So, and you're more malleable at 6. Yeah. I mean, I can barely. I remember I was like a weird kid at 6, and that hasn't changed really. But I don't.
Well, I've always been very malleable. I adapt myself very well to things and people, and it's just that I adapt sometimes too much, and I forget to express myself in my own voice. And I think this is to bring it back to what we were saying. This is exactly what I'm expressing through piano.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no danger of being. Do you even have to like put some space if you listen to some other composition? Like, I know if I listen to a comedian that has a particularly distinct voice, I start writing in their voice, and then I have to like get some kind of like mental sorbet or whatever, and cleanse my brain's palate. I don't know where there's metaphors.
No, I understand what you're saying. I get that. I get that with people who surround me. I don't listen to modern classical music at all. I don't want to get like influenced or anything. Like I'm very much a sponge. I'm gonna just like grab something and I can adapt myself to a point that sometimes I don't even know who I am anymore. But not now that I'm 30 and in my 30s, I've done therapy and I've been through that. But in my 20s, it was hard.
Yeah, you're getting the full brunt of my neuroses at the moment. Well, wait, how did you solidify your identity? Because I think it took me a long time to figure out. Probably into my late 20s. To like really, like I was like there were obviously like you could have there were adjectives that describe me that were pretty accurate, but until I like really felt who I was, it took a long time because of that same thing about being hijacked by other people's voices. By also like I was real scared to voice my own opinions.
Yeah.
Was that the same kind of thing for you?
Absolutely.
How did you figure out? Was it therapy that helped you clarify who you were as a person?
Actually, art. I would say like that. It's just really lately since I decided that I was also working in advertisement. I was doing music for ads for 5 years, even 8, 10, working from home and then in a studio full time. I became a partner of the studio, so I really, build a career there. And then I crashed. I had a burnout, and And then I decided I was going to go full time into art, into just expressing my voice as an artist and as a human being. And now I go on stage. I confronted my fear of the stage. I was scared of flying. I confronted my fear of flying. Now I take the plane every week, literally. And I confronted my fear of being a vulnerable person, and because now I'm going on stage doing the thing, playing very, very vulnerable and intimate songs. So now I know who I am, because I did all these 3 major fears. I just faced them, and I think that really helped me into existing into really who I was. So yeah, I took a stand, and that's it. And the therapy helps, of course. I mean, of course it helps. It helps everyone. Everybody should do therapy.
Was it a conscious thought, I'm going to overcome these fears? Was it, I know for me, I had to like trick myself. I was scared of moving to New York to pursue comedy because I come from like a pretty middle class background. There was no safety net. If I failed, that's it. Yeah. And I had this like vision of myself in the future of being this failure, like sitting in a like stained t-shirt in a like
that doesn't help
terrible in like this like old ratty recliner watching reruns and eating like a microwave meal, and like that fear of that being the rest of my life if I fail was so potent that it really stopped me for a long time. I had to kind of like I really tricked myself into doing it, but it seems like you made a conscious decision.
I did. I wasn't scared of failing. I've never been scared of failing. I mean, I don't want to fail, but
sure.
that's not, I was scared to be seen. I was scared to reveal myself. And I was scared of all the emotion that it was going to, the stress and everything, all that. But I did make a very conscious choice. Yeah. But I also did not have the choice because my body just let go. It stopped me. It's like, okay, you sit down a little bit on this chair and you think about what's up, because you don't crash like that if there's not something wrong.
You mean you really had a physical crash?
Yeah, burnout is very physical. It's some people it's headaches. When some people start having panic attacks, you have symptoms. Me, it was like very much in my head, hurt, nervous system, and I was depressed. It's a depression. So it stops you, and then you're like, okay, why have I been stopped by my own body? And you have to think. So that was also a moment where I was forced to, but I knew. I was like, okay, I cannot continue to not listen to myself like that.
So what was the first thing you confronted? The second thing was fear of flying, right?
Yeah, it's a more regular one, I would say, but yeah, it was fear of flying. Yeah.
Well, how did you? We were actually talking because of living in this fear state that we might have to give up our dog if we have to slowly introduce the dog to the cats.
Yeah.
Okay, and if for some reason after these 3 weeks when they finally do meet, and if the dog goes nuts and there's no way to train the dog, then we're gonna have to give the dog up. Yeah. So I've been talking about like this fear of these things, or like.
That's anticipation. That's the thing. You can you just anticipate stuff all the time, and it's never ending.
Yeah.
And in the end, life is always going to show you that whatever you've anticipated, that's not what's going to happen. Something else will come bite you in the ass that you didn't even think about. So there's no use. I mean, it's just creating more stress.
So how did you overcome this then? I mean, you had this palpable bodily fear. All 3 things. Palpable bodily fear, I assume, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I would.
Was it just force of will? Was it just pure force of will?
It was, and also I knew that I just could not go on to do the alternative, which was lying to myself. Mm-hmm. I couldn't. My body wasn't going to advance anymore, so I didn't really have a choice. But it was just will, and at one point I used to be sick before going on stage, so I had to accept. I'm like, okay, I'll just be sick. And then, okay, I might have a panic attack in a plane. Okay. And I never did. And the stage just went much better than I thought, and I actually feel comfortable on a stage now. I get anxious. I mean, I get nervous, but like any artist would. So it's really a mental process. Most times you think you're scared, and then you do it. I mean, I think this is a form of therapy. I think they treat anxiety like that.
Yeah.
I've never done that kind of therapy, but I didn't have to. I just did it instinctively, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember getting nervous getting on stage to the point where like I was like physically ill. I can remember that. And now, you know, maybe if it's like an unknown audience or like I'm not sure of the material, then I am slightly nervous. I'm like, we'll see how this goes. But it's not. I don't think I've been that ill.
But I think it's the same thing for anything that scares you. I think you do it. You confront yourself to it more and more, and then eventually it's gonna go away.
I do think there's something particular though about you or other people who like confront your fear. Like you can live with fear all your life, and you can let it prevent you from doing anything or doing whatever the thing is that you're afraid of. I think there is something particular about like saying I'm not going to. I'm curious about that for you. Like, you know, you could have just been afraid for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
but
there's no way. I have a personality that I want to evolve. I constantly want to evolve. If I start not to move and things don't move and don't evolve, I get very uneasy. So that's one thing. And the other is that it was in the way of what I wanted to do and what I needed to do with my life. So I had to. You know, it was just like right there on the road, like this big obstacle I needed to just deal with. Yeah.
When you were a kid, do you think Paris formed you mostly as a person? France? I mean, did you live in Paris for the rest of your childhood then?
No, we just lived 4 years in Paris. We came back then to Montreal, but in the French system, I think what did influence me is that I went to school with people from many, many different countries. So I was very early, at a very early age, I was aware that you say Malkassian is an Armenian name. And, you know, I was really raised with many cultures. And I think that still influences me, and it gives me I'm interested, you know. I've been interested in knowing different people, different types of people. So when I travel, I'm just looking around at people all the time, and I love it.
Is there anything particular about either Canadian, either Montreal? I mean, obviously, French Canadian culture is different from the rest of Canada. But like, is there anything particular about that formed you, or about Parisian culture that formed you as a person? Not just like being introduced to so many different cultures and ethnicities.
I think Paris and the whole French part, it really, like, you know, you read Émile Zola when you're 7, you know, so you get you get really, it's like intellectual boot camp to live in France. Really, they have a very strong school system, and so I think it really helped to build my my sort of like debate personality. I don't like to debate, but I can. I can convince somebody of an argument, you know, argumentative thoughts or way of thinking. And then Quebec is really good. Is really like, for me, an open-hearted people. So I think they're very kind. I think they're very open. And so I'm a bit of a mix of these two things.
I was there for Just for Laughs a couple years ago, but I never. You don't get to go outside of like an 8-block radius of where the festival is. Yeah, so I think I went to Old Town.
Mm-hmm. You went down, yeah.
Yeah, and that was maybe the only bit of Montreal I actually experienced.
Well, that's the most touristic part. I mean, Old Town is not. We never go to Old Town. It's like, I don't know if you guys go to Hollywood.
When we're forced to, but not the like. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Beverly Hills. You go to Beverly. You know, I don't know. Actually, I've never been to LA. It's the first time. So, but I'm sure there's some places in the city where you don't really visit.
It's like Times Square in New York,
right?
Times Square. You avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah, exactly. So Old Town is a bit like that, but it's very nice. It's the most European part of the city, and but Montreal is a great city, very vibrant, lots of artists, indie scene. Very nice.
Yeah. When you started playing piano at 6, did you decide like, this is what I want to do for my life?
At 6, no.
Yeah.
No.
Like, at what point do you make like a conscious existential decision about, you know, even when I was like a professor, even when I was doing other things, in the back of my head, I kind of knew I really wanted to be doing comedy in some way. And the fear just didn't let me. I think the fear just clouded my brain and didn't like, I couldn't like consciously or make that like real, like deep existential choice that that's what I wanted to do.
I think many artists struggle with that. I do think there's a conscious choice to make. I did it twice. I did it when I went to college, because I decided to study music officially because I couldn't read the notes very well. So I had to do all this theory. And so this was the first time, and the second one was really 3 years ago when I had my episode of burnout, and I decided to go full time in it.
So, was it earlier on? Like, when you made that decision when you went to McGill, right?
I went to McGill. And my whole collegial years. So from I think I was 10 when we came back. From 10 to 18, even 20, I was at McGill, doing very classical training. And then I went to university. Mm-hmm. And so it was all, music has always been there, but I had to make an adult choice that this is what I was going to do with my life. So I think when I decided to study that, and I was a very good student, I had very good grades. And I went to the French system, and they were like, you're going to go into music? Really? Like, they thought I should go in political science or stuff like that. Very like psychology, very noble careers. And I was like, no, I'm going to study music. And so this was the first time where I had to make that really conscious choice. Mm-hmm. And I think after that, I really did work into music, just advertisement music. I did many, many things. And then I had to make the choice of going on stage. That was a second one, Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm really just curious. When I talk to people about like that, some people just fall into things. Some people, and that to me, I'm like, fine, sure, if that's what your story is, cool. But it doesn't really interest me. The stuff that interests me is the people that is that kind of existential decision, because I think it's difficult for a lot of people, and I think it's never. When I say this, I say it as if it's like a discrete choice. And I think it's a struggle for most people for their entire lives. You keep choosing in some way. Mm-hmm. Not to get all Sartre on us, but like it's a constant like choosing of this thing. Like, this is how I'm going to this is in me, and I'm compelled to keep doing it in some way. Like, could you feel, even in the years when you were making music for ads, like, could you feel it in you that like you needed?
Yeah, definitely.
Like, it wasn't just like you just burned out one day. It was a whole process that led to that. Yeah,
it was like not listening. Well, I did a first album called Pianoscope, and that one I did in a period where already I was like, oh, I don't think I could just write for ads. I think this is not fulfilling enough for me. And then I went back to it, and then I started to work even more seriously into it, and constantly I have to do a second album. I have to do a second album. So there was this voice, and I was just not listening, and I was busy. I was working a lot. I was good at my job. I liked it. Yeah. But there was constantly a voice that I had to put aside, and this is what eventually led me to burnout.
Yeah. Do you think the work was, I don't know if this is in any way answerable, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you think the work was in any way a conscious choice to obscure the voice in your head that was saying, I have to do this?
I don't think it was conscious, but it might have been. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the dumb version for me, which is like when I am, when there's something I don't want to, like some anxiety that I don't feel like really dealing with. And again, this is not conscious. It just so happens that like at those moments, I listen to a ton of podcasts to distract me. And it's just something that I'm like, oh, I'll just listen to this one. And then I keep listening and I keep listening. Yeah. And then eventually my brain goes, you have to deal with whatever this anxiety is.
But I think we all do that. I think we do that on our phone. I think we spend like, sometimes when you want to numb it out, you just scroll down Instagram or Facebook or whatever. I think all of us do that really. Because we have to fear, we don't want to face whatever we're feeling,
When you went into advertising, was there any parental pressure to not go into advertising necessarily, but was there any parental pressure to have a quote unquote real job?
No, not at all. No, my parents are not, they never pushed me. I mean, if there's something, I think they were waiting. They were like, when is she going to start? when is she gonna go on stage? I think they were.
Oh.
Yeah, they knew I was gonna do that.
It's so weird how the people around you know the stuff before you know it, and they're kind of just like looking at their watches, being like, "When are they gonna figure it out?" What were your parents like as people when you were growing up? You said your dad was sweet.
Yeah, my dad was sweet, was funny, didn't like conflict. And my mom was also very. My mom's a very sensitive woman. Also, like my mom she has superpowers. She can foresee the future and everything. So how was? I remember them as being very tender, very kind parents. Mainly, sometimes my dad would not be there, and my mom had 3 kids, so she had her moments of absence too. But mainly,
do you mean meant like I'm off in my brain?
Yeah. But no, I have very sweet parents. Honestly, like they never put any pressure on me. I think at the end of my high school, when really I was getting top grades, they had this moment where they were like, she could do anything. Like she could be a doctor, but it lasted 2 seconds.
But when you didn't choose doctor, they weren't disappointed.
But they knew I was going to do music. They've always known. They've known like since I was 6. So that wasn't a surprise to anyone. They were, as I said, they were just mainly waiting for me to just jump into it for real.
Was there what economic class did you grow up as?
We were very comfortable because my dad was working. My dad was Don Draper, as we remember.
Right.
So we were a very comfortable family. Not rich as really really rich, but just medium.
But there was no. Like I think my parents were disappointed when I didn't become a lawyer because I think they wanted me to. Not that like look entertainment. If you do well in entertainment, it's lucrative. Like I'm not.
Yeah.
Pretending like I'm doing this purely for...
It's just a less traditional... well, I think in entertainment and art in general, if you want it to be lucrative and actually make a living out of it, you have to be part of a very privileged percentage of people. It's not... I mean, most artists don't live from their art.
No, I mean, it's getting worse now. The more I see,
but it's always been pretty bad. I mean, except
really?
in the 80s. Yeah, this, when the majors, and I'm talking about music now, but it applies to other disciplines. But I think in the 80s, you had these huge record deals with a lot of money and everything. That doesn't exist anymore, if you're like 3% maybe of, like, if you're Justin Bieber, what is that, 0.01% of artists in the world? So I think we've always had many artists who don't live from their art, honestly.
I'm really curious. I'd be interested to hear, like, what are the economics of, like, the new pornographers or someone who's like, they're not Justin Bieber or, Celine Dion. They are, a mid-level indie rock band that, like, it's fairly popular for who they are. But I wonder what the economics are of that. I wonder what the economics are of that thing. Because I know, like, for where I am, it's a lot of hustling. You write a script. I get money from another podcast I do. I get, it's like bits and pieces. You do punch up on a script. You do all these like little things.
You diversify.
Yeah. You cobble together a patchwork of a living. So you can pay for dog food and
I think that's it. I think that's the key. It's just to diversify what you're doing. But I don't know. I don't know either, of course.
But like there was never any feeling of like I have to go into something that will that is lucrative. There was never like any kind of like pressure on you from that end.
No, I did start to work at one point because I remember I asked my mom for some money and she said no. And that was pretty much the moment where I was like, okay, I have to get a job. And then I got this ad opportunity, and the ad did really well, and I won a prize for it, and then it opened some doors, and I just followed that path, basically. And I was doing music, so I was actually making a living with music. So I'm like, oh, good, That's a good way, but then it wasn't fulfilling enough. Yeah.
Was there ever any feeling, like, did you ever have? I've had to reckon with this in the last couple, especially since moving to Los Angeles a couple years ago. I've always had some kind of like weird problem commodifying the art that I make. And I have it's like a contradiction that sits in me that I'm really trying to work out, because that's all this is, especially out here, is commodification of art.
Right.
And not like compromising, just literally selling it.
Okay.
Like, yeah. Like, I don't think I've ever compromised. There's stuff like you have to make compromises. Like, if someone, like, but never anything that betrayed the spirit of what I'm doing.
I think you have to make compromises, but not big enough so you lose your voice.
Yeah. But do you think your dad being in advertising, like, you never really had a problem with commodification?
Maybe I was brought up to think that, but I mean, I was never in contact with my dad's work, actually. And like, when I started to work in advertisement, I started to understand a bit more how it works, and then I could picture him in that lifestyle. But maybe, and I think actually that's more of my personality. As I said, I adapt myself a lot to people. So if I'm doing something and then the director is like, oh, I think I would like it to be a bit more like that, I'm like, okay, let's do it a bit more like that, you know?
Yeah. So
I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with being directed by people who don't know what they're doing at all, and who think they do. Mm-hmm. that I ended up being a bit sick of it, because then it's just. And also, you know, music in an advertisement, like who cares really? In the end, you know, I don't think you can last a long time in this industry and be happy.
Yeah,
I don't. As an artist, as a creator, no.
It's interesting. Through advertisement is where I really started to become comfortable with the idea of commodifying art in any way, because there was this time, and I don't know if it was the same in Canada, but like there was a time in the 90s where if you were making music, the idea of selling out was so abhorrent. Mm-hmm. Like it was just like, no, you don't do that. Like it was like, you know, K Records and Discord and all these places. This is like, no, we don't do that. Like Fugazi would never, they wouldn't even make t-shirts.
Yeah, some people, some band just got shat on because they did, I think Green Day, and like at the beginning they started a bit more, you know, indie, and then they were called sellouts by everyone. Yeah,
and there was like there was a moment where I saw it started with, I mean, Nick Drake was dead already, but like his music was in a Volkswagen commercial, and then another Volkswagen commercial, I think it was Volkswagen, had a Yo La Tango song, and I was just like, what the fuck are they doing? And then I remember like hearing or reading an interview with Ira Kaplan where he was like, well, how do you want us to keep making albums? Like, it's not, we can't live off of this. And if you want us to keep making albums, we have to do little things like that. And then I was like, oh, right. We all live in a world where we have to make a living. And
yeah, well, absolutely. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe the reality that caught up.
Right. I think maybe we're still the fumes of the golden era of America, at least. And I assume the rest of, the Commonwealth and Western Europe, like still the post World War II boom. The fumes were wearing out in the 90s.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then everyone's like, oh shit, I still have to.
I mean, our parents, you're about my age. They lived in an era where just Don Draper could exist. Yeah. Don Draper doesn't exist anymore, you know? My
dad, like, I remember them talking about like, oh yeah, you could just like, you could buy a house and just pay off the mortgage. And I'm just like, pay off the mortgage? What kind of world are you living in where you can pay off a mortgage? Yeah. Like, were you aware of economic realities when you were younger?
No.
Like, were you class conscious at all?
I was when I came back from Paris. I went to a school in Quebec, and then we lived up the hill. The school was down there, and up the hill was the rich neighborhood. And I remember saying, I live up the hill, and the girl said, haha, like she thought I was making a joke. And I'm like, no, I'm not, I actually live up the hill. And then I realized that, well, she said, but only the really rich people live up the hill. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I started to get conscious of that. But it was really the beginning. I was 11 or something, 10. Mm-hmm. Because in France, we were actually poor. like in the school I
Wow.
went, we were not like the richest of the school. I went to school with like the president's kids.
Oh gosh.
So we were the lower class over there. You know, it's all about perspective.
Yeah. Were you like, I couldn't articulate it, but I could feel it. Like when I went to very wealthy friends of ours, when I went to their house, it felt like there was a different kind of decorum. Like it felt almost like stepping into another dimension in some way, if that metaphor makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And like you could feel the way that they regarded me. Like if I used the wrong fork, this is a dumb version of it, but like that there was like some kind of disappointment in me. Could you feel like, was it a bodily feeling?
No, we weren't like that at all.
Well, not you necessarily, but just like feeling different.
At certain of my friends' house, I could feel a bit of that. Like really, they were living in a different reality. But I was brought up very rich socialist type of family, so there was no of this decorum at all. Actually, my dad really dislikes these things, but yeah, I had some friends definitely where they live in a bubble. They do. And then they stay in that bubble usually because they become lawyers, they become people in finance. And they just go on, you know. But in our case, like my sister's also a stand-up comic. And my brother, he works in art and economics. So we, all three of us had to just start to make a living, like from scratch. So we just like, you know, we did not have like all these $1 million accounts where you just, you know, you have that. And like some of the people I went to school with did.
Were you okay? So you said you're like a kind of socialist tradition.
Yeah.
Like were your parents, like, were they politically active? Were they just like, did they just have certain political beliefs?
No, they just have left kind of point of views. They weren't active politically, no. No.
Like I asked that because like I grew up, like my parents are like Democrats. They're like I think they're what the phrase is, like yellow dog Democrats. They'll vote for whoever the Democrat is. Okay. And obviously they're like they have left leaning beliefs, but I don't think anything like I had to make a choice like in my early 20s to really like, oh no, I'm way further left than you guys. And I had to like actually, you know, it was like an actual like thought process for me to like go through like what did I believe. And did you have like a thing like that?
Well, I'm not a very political person. Like I don't usually step up and talk about, but because I really profoundly dislike conflict. So I try to stay away. I'd rather play soft piano and for people to feel good and be wrapped up in softness than rise up. And my best friend is like that. She's a very political girl, and I could never do that. I don't like adversity. So, and I think my parents are a bit like that too.
So you were always conflict averse?
Yeah.
Does that turn you into like a people pleaser or just someone who wants to avoid all like people in general?
If I can do something and not lie to myself and please someone, I will. But mostly I just stay away from it.
Because like I'm conflict averse, but I'm also a contrarian in some ways. So that's just made me avoid people. Whereas my wife is conflict averse, but has turned her into a people pleaser in some way.
Yeah, I think, they're both of them are sort of solutions.
I don't know if either are good solutions necessarily. No. I think it really does, like anytime like someone disagrees, like early in my life, especially if someone had a different opinion from me, I just wouldn't say what my opinion was. I mean, if it was something heinous, if they're like
I think France helped me out with that because it's like an art to debate over there. You know, it's fine. That's how you get in relation with people. You know, you agree, I don't agree, and that's fine. You know, I want everybody to agree, but I've been brought up, you know, also in a country where it's normal and it's good. It's actually quite sane to debate. You know?
Yeah. Well, actually, I want to ask about that. When you said you were like raised in the kind of, you know, the French intellectual tradition, you're reading Zola at age 7, Proust at 8, or whatever it is. Does that obscure your emotional side at all? Do you know what I mean by that at all?
Yeah.
Like I was raised very intellectually. I was like, you know, top of my class, all that kind of stuff. And I think that let me not address my emotions because I could always just go off in that direction.
Yeah, definitely. I think for sure if you overthink, it's also a refuge. It's also a way of not feeling.
Yeah.
But piano, that's for me. That's what it was. You know, just always bringing back to, oh, how do you feel? Oh yeah, okay. You know, so that's why I say, and I bring back to what we said in the beginning, is that I needed it. You know, mainly for this balance between rational and emotional.
Have you ever discovered something by playing piano?
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes I sit down and I'm like, oh, I didn't know I felt this bad. I didn't know I felt this shitty these days. Or on the contrary, oh wow, this is very peaceful. I must be in a good. I observe my emotions through the piano. Yeah.
Actually, I think that's a good place to end.
Yeah.
How do you feel? How do you feel?
I'm hot. I'm really. I'm really hot.
Yeah, I didn't mean it for it to be this warm in here today.
That's great. Yeah.
All right, so just to recap, battle between the intellectual and the emotional in you. Did you?
Sure.
Was it piano? Actually, here's the last thing. Maybe then was it piano that like allowed you to come to some kind of like when you found out who you were as a person, when you like really discovered your identity, as you said before, did that allow those sides to come to some kind of like I don't mean peace, but like reconciled those into one whole person,
balance,
as opposed to feeling like you are different. Like it was when I like realized what my identity was, that those sides of me kind of merged into one whole human. And I wasn't like, in this context I'm emotional, but in this context I'm intellectual. Like I'm fluidly all those things now, and I can fluidly move from one mode to another, as opposed to one self to another self. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. I think it's all about balance, and sometimes I think when we feel too many things or we're too sensitive, we want to block it out, and you become this sort of you have a shield around your heart, you know. Yeah. And I think we need to find some ways to be more open-hearted and to live life with this sort of openness. And art does help if this is your means of expression, but it could be whatever, you know. It could be baking some cakes if it helps you to be more of an open person, and balance. Yeah.
I really think that in the Western tradition, the Western intellectual tradition specifically, I've been thinking about this a lot, especially since Trump, because I was like, was rationality ever, what are the boundaries for rationality? Was it ever such that you could really convince someone with an argument? Or were we always emotional? Has it always been humans are emotional beings first, and we feel things first, and then rationality is used to justify certain things, and then it just became so obscuring. Like I wonder how, like our own, you know, as we talk for the last hour, our own personal journeys to kind of like excavate the emotional part of ourselves from underneath the intellectual part, if that's in some way a microcosm of this got very heady, a microcosm of what the Western intellectual tradition over. Oh yeah,
you lost me there. You completely lost me.
Because we're now in this breakdown of rationality where you can have an argument about like climate change, and there's like 40% of the U.S. population. I mean, look, you're in an insane country at the moment, but like 40% of the population just doesn't give a shit. They're like, I don't care, let it burn. There was a study I read 2 days ago where there are people who are just like they enjoy chaos now, and they don't give a shit.
Do they enjoy chaos, or do they just enjoy their own personal liberties and they don't want to look beyond?
Specifically, they're like these three academics did a study, and they're like, no, they like want to see things burn. They are specifically, there's like a large segment of the U.S. population.
Oh boy, I'm not gonna get into that. That would take another hour.
Yeah, I sorry, I didn't mean to get. I'm just curious about like. I'm like, oh, I wonder if like our journeys are just like in some way an instantiation of the general human journey. That's way too. I don't know if that's it. That's not answerable.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I mean, I think we are just emotional beings. I do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, you're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was very cool.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye. Bye.